I'd like to start at the beginning and ask you how you sort of first heard about Chantal Akerman, because I imagine it, obviously in the 90s, her films weren't available like they are today. So how did the sort of journey start?
Well, I was a young cinephile in a pre-internet world. So most of the film I respected, I had not seen. I had a list of things I needed to see that were unavailable. This seems like prehistorical time. And so I knew about Jeanne Dielman, I knew how important it was, but I actually didn't see it until not so long ago, 10 years, 15 years ago. So I was already making films. So the first film I saw of Chantal Akerman was actually one that was released in a theater. It was La Captive, her adaptation of Proust. And I was at film school. I had just entered film school, 2001. Great year, because there was Mulholland Drive, it was La Captive. Yeah. There was also La Ciénaga by Lucrecia Martel. So I finally, I discovered her through a contemporary film, and then watched everything when I could. I don't know if I've seen anything. I don't think everything. I don't think so, because she has this ecology of images that something becomes something else, For the past few months in Paris, and this exhibition has been traveling and will be, there was a big exhibition around Chantal Akerman. So an art installation, a film, all being in dialogue very harmoniously. And so I keep learning about her. And the more I learn about her, the more I love her.
We'll go back to La Captive later, but as interesting, obviously you went to film school. She famously dropped out of film school. How do you sort of see your kind of early years alongside hers? You grew up in this, I believe, this quite utopian town, in that it was a sort of new town. She grew up in Brussels in this quite constricted environment and really sort of felt the need to rebel against it. But you both. You studied literature. She was, famously very into literature, wanted to be a writer. So, I see a lot of similarities between you two, but also some differences. Yeah, I don't know if there's a response to that, or if, particularly the sort of film school and like what your experiences there versus her experiences.
Well, yes, there are some similarities also because we are women in this industry, and that things haven't changed much. But the big difference is that I didn't know about her story. I didn't know she dropped out of film school. Maybe it would have inspired me, to do so. I was much more submissive. And also I was learning screenwriting. I didn't see myself as a director when I was in film school. It was my personal conspiration or my secret, I don't know. So her boldness, a very personal approach to cinema that is fully disconnected from cinephilia, I think, is something I would have liked to know, because I was really, really embedded in loving the films rather than loving the language. And now today I don't really care much about films, I must say sometimes. But I'm a big friend of cinema, the language of cinema. And so her approach to film, she decided that first she wanted to write. She wanted to write books, she was into literature. And then she saw one film, and she understood that cinema was a language, and then she decided to do it. I was like a library geek. I was making lists. I was like, reading about Chinese cinema in the 90s, and she was free of that. And I wish I could have, I love that freedom. I think it inspires me now, and it helps me to keep up with exploring my language without being that submissive to cinephilia that's been really, really cruel to my people. And, the mythology of her saying one film and then deciding that this language she could speak. The film was Pierrot le Fou by Jean-Luc Godard. But it's not about that film. Because if you just need one film, it means it's not about that film. It means it's a film that explains, that gives to you the fact that cinema is a language. And of course, Jean-Luc Godard is very good for that, because he's only doing that. No, in a good way. I mean, it's great. He's a great philosopher for film. But, you know, I stayed in film school, but in a way, I did my first film also in a very similar energy, I think, as the first gestures he did. Not having done anything before, not considering myself a director, just showing myself in a coming-of-age story that I wanted to be, that was fully connected to what the language of cinema could offer to this storyline, to this project. So I was more shy, but I think we share the beliefs,
and the conviction.
Yes, and the conviction, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And was she taught at your film school at all?
No.
Okay, interesting.
Yes. But they didn't really teach us about directors in particular. Some would come visit us, you know. But she was not invited. And you know, the first time that I actually encountered the material from Chantal Akerman that had not been made is that in 2008, you know, in France we have this system, very strong support of films to public money, and so it's people from films that are actually giving the grants to their colleagues. And so I was doing that, you know, as a very young filmmaker. And I was in this commission, you know, to give money, and suddenly on the list I see Chantal Akerman. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to read a script from Chantal Akerman. And I'm like, this is going to be so exciting, and also we're going to give her money, you know? And so I am then in the room, and I'm like, hey, Chantal Akerman. And she told me, yeah, and she doesn't get the money. Man, I understood something that day that really I still have in there about this industry and about how this industry treats its great artists. I was devastated.
Why didn't she get the money?
Because, you know, they were kind of evaluating every project. You know, it's very competitive in a way. And so, do we give her? And I was like, it's Chantal Akerman. It's Chantal Akerman. She has to go to, of course, you know, with cinema, so we have a strong public support, but also you have to get money, you know, it's not enough. So she's going to have to go to see some kind of banker so that they look at her idea and see like, yeah, is this good or not? But we are doing that also. She ended up having the money and she made the film because you have 3 times. But like, I was like, what's happening? I understood something deep about my own future. No, but about our future, you know. I was shocked. Yeah.
Let's go back to La Captive. And what was it in that film that struck you?
Well, yeah, it was the first film I was seeing of her. And, you know, in the film school, we were all super excited about La Captive, so we were talking about it a lot. And at the time, I was really, really into Proust. I was reading it a lot. And so I watched the film. And I found it amazing, and I got out and I was like, well, yes, of course, the language of cinema is perfect for adapting Proust, because it's a sculpture of time, it's editing, it's harmonies in time. And I was like, yes, of course. And then I discovered that the mythology around adapting Proust for film is that it was impossible to adapt, which tells a lot about how this language has been chasing a weird path. A path of, because it was impossible to adapt, because, you know, it's hard storytelling. How do you do that kind of storytelling? And also it's all about casting. So cinema is all about storytelling and casting. How do we tell this thing, you know, and who is going to be Charlus, and like Catherine Deneuve played the Comtesse de Guermantes, or whereas Chantal Akerman, she just, you know, worked with our language to actually make it in a very, very something that seemed obvious. So this also taught me a lot about, the use of that language, where it's heading, and the fact that cinema would say, no, I'm not competent to do, to adapt Marcel Proust, for me is super weird. And of course, she proved in a very, something that seemed very simple, that it is possible, actually.
And she famously didn't reread the book. She'd read it I think she'd read it and she wanted to maybe make an adaptation of La Recherche de Thomas Baudu after making Jeanne Dielman, but that didn't happen. And when she wrote the script, she didn't go back to read the book. So she just sort of remembered about the film, and she famously sort of said, "I remember that there was an apartment corridor and the two characters. That's the story for me," she said.
Yeah.
Which is...
If there's a corridor, there's a story. And you know, that's really like what we shared is that I'm also obsessed with corridors.
Tell us about corridors.
Oh yeah, I mean corridors. It's like, you know, Portrait of a Lady on Fire was mostly written around a corridor that doesn't not exist in the film in the end.
Okay.
But we've been looking for a castle with a corridor for so long, and I was like, I need my corridor, I need my corridor. And so I was frustrated with the corridor on this one, but you know, we had big perspectives, and so it's the same. On Petite Maman, I decided to shoot studio, and I built my own corridor, which means, you know, you build your own groove, because a corridor is a groove. A corridor means someone walking straight. And if you build your own corridor, first you build it so that the dolly fits and you can do track shots. And I remember with my DOP, you know, when you're doing studio, you're just at first drawing your space on the floor. And how long was the corridor? And so it's like for a child to walk at that pace and make 8 or 10 or 12 steps, that's music, right? So I fully understand that corridor obsession.
You've chosen a clip from La Captive to show us. Maybe we can just set it up a little bit, because the film is, I mean, it's quite an uncomfortable watch.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, I find, yeah. Do you not know?
No.
It's a film, you know, it's about, you know, it's one of her few films where she's shot it from a male point of view, and it's all about this man who is intensely possessive of his girlfriend. But as with all Chantal Akerman films, there's not a message, there's a lot of complexity, and we don't really know what the characters are thinking. And there's a sense of, well, who is the captive of the title? Is it Stanislas Mayer's character, or is it Sylvie Testud? And what is going on in their relationship? Yeah. Do you want to set up the clip?
Well, the clip is it's the scene that really hit me the most in the film, when I think about the film, I think about that scene. And it's a scene that kind of embodies how she adapted Proust, that she invented something that would convoke, because the character, as in Proust, is obsessed by the fact that his lover might be lesbian. So how do you do that? No, but how do you do that in film language? Because, you know, in the book, it's like very simple. It's like, oh, I'm watching her, she's talking with girls, I know she loves girls, and, you know, and she does, you know. And so how do you translate that in the language of film? Well, that's the clip.
Scherzo sei ai dolci detti, io di que risponderò. Sospirando e sospiretti io dell'altro imiterò. Mi dirà ben mio mimoro, mi dirà mio bel tesoro, ed intanto che diletto, ed intanto che diletto, che spassetto io proverò. quel brunettino che più lepido mi pare. Scherzo sei dai dolci detti, sospirando i sospiretti, io di quel risponderò. Io dell'altro mi dirà ben mio mimoro, mi dirà mio bel tesoro, ed intanto che diletto, ed intanto che diletto che spassettio proverò, ed intanto che diletto che spassettio proverò, oh, io proverò, oh, io proverò.
It's a really beautiful duet, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, you know, that's the beauty of Chantal Akerman's impact. You can't comment it. And, you know, I mean, what do you want? I mean, it's this is pure cinema. It's like, you see the program, you see the idea, you see how it's done. It's straight, and also in a way it's fun, because frankly, for me, the cuts, because yeah, you say it's a hard watch, but for me, his face, the way where we cut, we kind of laugh. You know, I think she has very strong humor, because you know it's not about is it fun on screen, it's about that joy of idea, you know, the joy that you have when an idea is hitting you. Even if it's a sad idea, even if it's a cringe situation, the joy of the idea, the joy that, yeah, it's clever. That's what she's giving us. And that joy is, for me, is the most important, especially now, you know, when we're like, hey, where do we find joy? Mm-hmm. The joy of idea is real, you know, and most of what we stand for is idea, so.
Yes, I mean, La Captive must be an interesting sort of starting point for Akerman, because it's, you know, if you know her for her sort of more avant-garde films of the 70s, it's very different to those. I mean, there's lots of similarities, but the style that she films it in, and you know, obviously her use of music, is quite opposite to those films. And as you say, that joy is there.
But I think each of a film is a prototype, and each time she tries to adapt. Also, you know, she also went overseas to shoot in the United States. You know, she tried to make her films. That's very moving, because you know she started really by sounding like herself. It's pretty rare. And then, because also of how films are made, she kind of always searched, you know, of a way to make films, and so she changed style. Golden 80s, for instance, I really recommend that you see that film. It's her musical, you know, and she wanted to make a popular film. She wanted people to see her film. So she adapted to the industry. And this is also a moment when I watch La Captive, I'm like, oh, she really expressed herself there. Of course, she adapts to the time, but each time she finds her own way, her own path in it. But it's also kind of, you know, it's always for me, sometimes sad. You know, there's a melancholy in loving Chantal Akerman, that, you know, she had to fight so much to make her ideas. I find that super revolting, you know.
I mean, she famously had to wait, 5 years for funding for Golden 80s. She hadn't had to make a film about making a musical to prove to people that she could make a musical.
Yeah.
But she did always, you know, find a way to make something, which is what I guess I find inspiring, that she would make short films, she would make films for television, particularly French television, so you're quite blessed. One film that was Family Business, which was made and shown in Channel 4 in the UK.
Oh, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
yeah, all about...
Thank you.
With Aurore Clement. All about going to America to try and get funding. Yeah, I mean, we can take that, that is sort of inspiring and something to... I mean, I don't know sort of how, you know, do you think of her when you're trying to get money for films, or sort of make cinema happen or in the past perhaps when it's, you know, you weren't so recognised?
Did I think about her? Well, you know, I think about her more deeply now than I used to, because now I understand. You know, now I'm 47, I understand. And I think also, you know, now that she has that momentum, part of which is great, you know, but she also went through backlash with that momentum when Sight and Sound said this is, well, all the filmmakers who voted said this is the best film of the story of cinema. She went through a strong backlash. I went through a strong backlash too, because I was 30 in that list. Okay. So yeah. Quite an entrance, huh? And I had 2 films in that list also. Yeah. You know, Petite Maman was there also. So strong backlash. I didn't vote for that list, I must say. But I was asked, as anyone, and my first film was Jeanne Dillman. And then I was like, I just want to put that film, because. And then when I saw that a lot of us were doing that, I was grateful. Why was I saying that? Why? Sometimes I get lost. Yes. Why? What were you asking? Do I think about her?
Do I think about
yes,
her?
And so in that momentum, when she's finally recognized, there's a side of me that want to say, no, she's not yours. You know, she's not part of your tradition. Cinema is so young and it's lazy enough to already have a tradition, and Chantal Akerman is not part of that tradition. You know, I want to reclaim her. I feel like I want to defend her in places where she's like celebrated. That's why I want to talk, and that's why I think even more deeply about her now.
Because you haven't, really talked about her influence. You know, you've sort of mentioned Hayao Miyazaki in relation to Petite Maman, and
Yeah.
I saw that you did a list of 50 films that you recommended, but I went through them, there's no Akerman there.
Yeah, I don't like lists. I don't really have influences. That's also what I like about Akerman. I mean, my influences is all films, in a way. I mean, I don't know, it's like the ideas, the language of cinema is all I think about, but I kind of departed from the cinephile approach that I think is really politically embarrassing regarding how films are made, you know, the process of making a film. And Chantal Akerman, try to look for what a list from Chantal Akerman. Try to look for a film she loved. You will never find it. No, because she doesn't talk about that. And I also, you know, she's a colleague. It's not about influences. It's about, do we share ideas, you know? What is our perspective on the language of cinema? And I think we're looking for the same thing. And I also think we share some kind of process. I can feel in all her film that she's thinking about editing all the time, and that, you know, making a film is about projecting future harmonies. And I feel that in her work all the time. I feel that in Jacques Demy's work also, you know. The way she writes is about those future harmonies. And I write like that too. It's not about storytelling and what are they going to say. It's about that wall, that shirt, that line of dialogue, that sound. And that's our job as screenwriters, you know. There might be a lot of screenwriters in the room, I hope so. And, you know, we are projecting future harmonies, and that's what she's always doing. And even politically, that's what she's doing, you know. This doesn't land.
What you were saying, and I suppose now is maybe a good time for the clip from Portrait of a Lady on Fire that you have picked. But I think it's interesting that you obviously what you were saying about influences, and, you know, there's a particular tendency to maybe show off your influences in your cinema, not in your cinema, but in a lot of other filmmakers are like, oh, look at me. Look, I'm making a film with this reference and this reference.
Yeah, cinema is very competitive. I don't understand why. It's the Olympics 4 times a year. What's happening? And it's really like, there's like all this, you have these references, and it's official, and it's like I'm doing like this, but like him, but in this way, and it's not free thinking at all. But, you know, cinema was born with the 20th century. It's an art of the 20th century. It's embedded in capitalism. It's very immature. It's very young. You know, it has a lot of potential. Right now, it's been really embedded in, capitalism. And so it's very repetitive, and it's not free. So I'm very hopeful for that language. Not at all hopeful for that industry. But that's okay. I think one goes with the other. For the first time in, cinema is the only art with no amateurism. That's weird, That's really weird. It has changed for a few years that now the people are actually expanding the language of film through editing apps. So I think this is amazing, that the people are expanding the language of film. We'll see how cinema react to that. Why was I saying that also?
Well,
I'm back from 3 days of teaching in Cambridge. So I've been talking all day for 3 days. So if you find that my brain is a little bit fried, hey, it's true. It's really true. Why was I?
We were talking about, we were going to introduce the Portrait of a Lady on Fire clip.
Exactly.
Which is,
and I was, yes. And
I
why
can see
was
some
I
influences.
Saying that, yes, influences.
I guess, how they manifest in your cinema.
Yes, yeah. For me, when I say, for instance, that Miyazaki is an influence or that Akerman is an influence, is that they give me courage. It's really that. It's like they give me courage to have ideas for film. But it's not that I want to do like them or, it's like, I feel like it's, it gives you hope for that language and to have ideas that are like pushing. So, for instance, the clip I'm about to show you is really, it's really a frame where we're talking about Chantal. We were saying like, this is, in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, each time we were in the kitchen, I think I even wrote it in my intentions to get the money. Like the kitchen will be thinking about Chantal Akerman, and with my DOP Claire Maton, on the set we would just say, yeah, this is like full Chantal. This is like mini Chantal. Mostly because I think we share something that is the love of frontality. Like, I never look at something like that, or like that is like... and so it's not that I want to do like her, it's that that we do it the same way, and so it gives me strength, that she's there, and that she did it. So yeah, this scene it was basically born out of her braveness with frontality and time. And it's beautiful also how it's easy to do. Because, cinema is easier than you think. It's just that the images seems to cost so much that it seems to be like impossible. But it's actually very simple.
Let's talk about the first part of the clip.
Yeah.
First. So obviously there's all the domestic activities. And I also thought, Adèle Haenel-Elwaz is obviously, aristocratic in a similar way to Delphine Seyrig, who played Jeanne Dielman and was not used to doing, the activities of a housewife that she played in the film. So there's actually a nice synchronicity there that I hadn't really thought about before. But yes, tell me why this was so important to you.
Because it felt so good. I remember being super excited by shooting this scene exactly because it is so easy. And I remember also the three actors, how happy they were living in that frame. And, I think this is also the spiritual aspect, the mystical part of cinema, that an image is also, you can feel when it's been done in joy or with some kind of very simple pleasure. Yeah, once more, the fact that it's very easy. It's not that difficult. Of course, if you're doing a car crash scene, it's difficult, But this is action, and it's so simple. And it's really how a frame can, be a bubble of time, So yeah, I think cinema can be as simple as that. Of course, you have to build up something that allows that kind of, because that scene is just a moment in a film that is not built like that. Whereas Jeanne Dielman is built around repetition and rituals, but because she made those rituals, I can make it once and it's part of her rituals and all the gestures made by women in domestic spaces, in history of art and in cinema. So it belongs to a culture. And regarding cinema, it belongs to a culture thanks to her. But it's also a culture that was there before and that she understood and put on screen.
Yeah, I mean, she famously said about Jeanne Dielman that it was, really sort of, important to her to pay tribute to the actions of women and the domestic rituals that, are not normally shown in cinema.
Yeah.
And I suppose, there's a link to Portrait Lady on Fire in terms of the, female sex and the way that you, the lesbian sex and how you show that and how cinema has traditionally shown that in terms of, both, trying to break new ground and show a different gaze, a different way of thinking about cinema. And as Jeanne Dielman was, a very political film when it came out, and she did call it a feminist film, but obviously later began to feel more ambiguous about being described as a feminist filmmaker, wouldn't show her films in kind of feminist festivals. How do you feel about her kind of, dislike of labels?
Well, she's a smart woman and she wanted to make a film, so I think it talks about the industry more than feminism. It's sad that you would start claiming it and then that you would have to kind of compose with it because it becomes such a burden. I understand, frankly. But for me, it's not true. I mean, she was a feminist filmmaker, and and the fact that she didn't want to be labeled that at some point talks a lot about the context in which she made her art, and it's very sad.
And when did you first see Jeanne Dielman, and what was the impact of the film?
When did I first see it? I swear, that's hard to tell. I don't really remember the first time I saw it. I saw it in a theater not a long time ago because I saw it otherwise, I
mean, it is a film that needs to be seen in the theatre, really. Do you think?
Well, it's good also to watch film at home. I think I think the pressure we put on people to watch film in the room is weird, I even feel, because it's kind of judgmental, like people don't understand the community of the room. People understand community of rooms. People understand it's also 20 euros or 20 pounds, and also maybe they don't want to watch your things, or they watch it at home, nice. But the fact that this cinema is about, and success of the film is about counting the seats for the first 2 weeks. And if the seats are full, it's good. And if they're empty, it's you failed. I don't really care about that logic. So it's also nice to watch film at home, I think. No, but it's the same language. I mean, of course, for the sound, it's better if you have... but I don't think, it's lame. It's just another time, I'm so happy that the young generation... I mean, if I had to wait for the films that I'm discovering right now from the past to be on the big screen to watch them, I would still be in the patriarchal history of cinema. I would have not seen Lizzie Borden, Martha Coolidge, I would have not seen Barbara Hammer, If we have to wait for it, I would love to see those on the big screen every day. I would adore that. It's not the case. So, I really respect the fact that we can watch it on smaller screens, but it's the same language with the same impact. If we're focused, if we're in it, it's okay. So Jeanne Dielman, I didn't see on the big screen, but it had a big impact on me. And I think I don't really remember when I saw it. The moment it's been part of my life, it has changed it. So I don't remember,
There wasn't a before Jeanne Dielman and an after Jeanne Dielman?
Yes, there was, to the point that I don't even remember when I saw it. No, I think I saw it on TV. It's a film that I enjoy more and more and more. I kind of watch it every year. I like to live in that space and I understand the film more and more. I feel closer and closer to her work. By having this opportunity to age, to grow old, watching cinema and making films. So she's much more... Before, I was really a cinephile, so I was like respecting it a lot, but among other things, you know. And now I put it in a very different place that I want to protect.
And how does, you know, each time you watch it, is there new things that kind of occur to you, that come to you?
Well, it's just each time I'm like believing in that language, you know, my faith in the language of cinema goes like... And most of the time I watch things and my faith in the language of cinema goes... but my faith in films goes... So no, she's giving me all this energy of believing in that exploration, and I think it's the case. I think like if an 18 years old into cinema watch Jan Lindman today, it's the same impact. That's what I find really, really beautiful, even though it's a very different political context. That's why I think the film is even more amazing to watch for a young crowd now. That, you know, we are facing the first generation that's being critical towards cinema, not in a critic way, but also in a moral way, in a political way. You know, cinema there's a lot of responsibility, and also, you know, has been the beginning of this great social movement called Me Too. And so now people are looking at film differently, and it's a good thing. And so it means that the films that have been like trailblazing for another history of cinema, suddenly they are even more important. And I think that, you know, that's why it became number one, but it shouldn't become number one of the cinephile culture. It should become number one of the young people wanting to make films, you know, among other number ones.
Do you think it's, you know, just that's kind of resonated with younger people today? Because I also think there's, you know, her sense of time and our sense of time today.
No, I'm not saying it's just that. I'm saying that there's that en plus. It's just that I think adds a layer of admiration, of respect, of trust. And that now, you know, I feel really good when I'm in the film. Before I was also like, how it's going to, you know. And now the political ideas of the film, even regarding sex work, even regarding, you know, I'm much more educated to this whole thing. And so I think I enjoy it even more. And I find it, very, I don't feel intimidated by it anymore. And the time that I spend with this character in this space doesn't feel like a threatening time because it's so much, you know. It feels like, wow, you really created space with a lot of ideas, a lot of rituals, a lot of times for me to go through. And I find that really, really beautiful, with being myself also much more politically aware of the situation of that language, because we know we all grew up together regarding that heart and its responsibility and the male gaze and all that stuff.
I was wondering sort of what you think about, I mean, she was obviously very radical from a very early age, which is, you know, sort of incredibly inspiring. And I was, you know, I suppose the sort of typical trajectory of a filmmaker is they're quite radical and then they become less radical as they get older, and then potentially maybe in your old age you get more radical because you don't care anymore. Depends how you think about that. How do you kind of keep that radical kind of core to you know, how does a filmmaker keep that radical core in the way that she did? Obviously, you know, and it wasn't easy because, say, she was very embraced by the avant-garde community, and then, you know, embraced, you know, quite changed her sort of style quite dramatically and embraced music, and, you know, that didn't go down well. I mean, there's, you know, more avant-garde sympathetic critics didn't like Golden 80s. You know, there was this
Golden
whole
80s
gear
is
change.
amazing.
But it is amazing, yeah. And it is also quite avant-garde in a way.
Oh yeah, fully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How you know, how can we today sort of preserve that energy when you know, everything sort of, you know, like you say about the industry, when it tries to take it out of you? Do you have answers?
I took a step from that industry so that I could actually, continue loving that language, practicing that language without corrupting or, I don't know, working for that industry, you know. I used to work in that industry, and once you get a little bit of success, and so it means people start making money, and then you work for that industry, you know, and I don't want that. So I'm staying radical by transforming myself, adapting, also, you know, reflecting, not keep on going in the same ritual, the same, because, you know, I'm not like Chantal Akerman. I filmed, you know, I can actually make, if I stay cheap, not too much, you know, I can make whatever I want, you know. People will give me money, you know, it's okay. So I'm in a very, very different position because I am resisting that. Mm-hmm. So now I'm saying, no, thank you. I have to think about this, and I have to think about how I want to make things. And so I guess sometimes staying radical is saying no, sometimes being radical is saying yes, you know, it depends. Yeah.
Maybe let's have another clip, which is from a very radical film, Je Tu Il Elle.
Yes.
Yes, which one I feel has a lot of resonance with your own work. I don't know how many people in the audience have seen the film, but it's a triptych, and we were talking about it today in the symposium, and one of the speakers was saying when it first showed in the UK, it sort of starts with Chantal, in her bedroom, and we know that she's suffered a breakup, and we see her doing lots of quite strange, absurd, sometimes quite funny
eating
things.
A lot of sugar.
Yeah. And then the second part of the triptych, she is hitchhiking, and she's picked up by a truck driver, and he's very sort of macho man. And when it first showed in the UK, a lot of feminists and lesbians were very excited about the film because they'd heard about, you know, how sort of groundbreaking it was, but actually walked out in the second act and didn't stay for the last act, which has one of the most amazing sequences, and, you know, amazing for sort of, you know, I suppose Hotel Monterey was her debut, but this was kind of more of a fiction debut. It was based on a piece of writing that she wrote and sort of put away. It was about her own experiences, and then she came back to film it. But the scene we're going to see is from the third segment, and it's before the kind of glorious sex scene, but it shows the desire that builds up to that, and also the comedy. So maybe we can talk about her as a comedian too. We can have the clip, please.
Je veux pas que tu restes, tu sais. C'est ça.
You know, when I watch her perform, I see the director perform. It's like one of the, I mean, they did the film very fast with no money, and so she kind of had to perform in it in a way, but it's really a way to do to direct from the inside, because she's making all the rhythm. You know, when she's waiting in front of the door, you can see, I can hear a count in her head, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4. So then she enters, how she plays with the thing, you know, how long
and
it
the
lasts.
noise of it as well.
The noise, the fact that she chose that is so noisy that every sound engineer would kill you, you know. When you bring leather, you're like, oh no. And how she plays with that sound, and then, you know, the timing of the elevator, the sound of the elevator, and she's directing the scene from inside, you know. And she's very brave, because then the sex scene after this is epic. It's epic. You've never seen a sex scene like that. No, it's really epic. And she's doing it with her own body. And I read, you know, things where she said, like, yeah, it was something. It's not something like she really, I mean, it was really to make the film. It's not that she wanted to be an actor. And it was, we can feel the groove of her directing through, with her body inside the frame. And I find that so moving. And it's, you know, it's part of the autonomy. That sometimes you have to put yourself in the frame. And the fact that she started with this, you know, this is what I find really beautiful about this film also, is that it's the counter-argument to what I was saying before, that it's an art made by old people. I don't know if I'm saying this to you or to my students, but hey. That Je Tu Il Elle is the only example, you know, it's one of the rare examples where cinema was changed by a teenager in their bedroom, which is all art has always been changed by teenagers in their bedroom. I mean, music, you know, and cinema is the only art form that is not changed by teenagers in their bedroom. That's changing, and that's changing since Chantal Akerman in a way, you know. But it's a beautiful example, a groundbreaking example of how, you know, youth can change the language. And the fact that that this young body is willing to put itself in the frame to actually direct this, make it groove, you know, I find beautiful. I think the joy of idea is something you craft. I don't think it happens by chance. I think it's an art of the reception. It means that she's thinking about you. She's thinking about the audience, that they're going to feel like that. And so dialogue can be obviously a part of that. I tend to think about dialogue in that way, that is, I'm trying to reach an impact with a single line. So for instance, in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, to land on, very cheesy line, by the way, don't regret, remember, you know, grooving with the rest of the film. It's kind of this impact that, you know. So dialogue is part of the tools that cinema offers to actually craft those landing of ideas. And sometimes a line of dialogue is going to you know, to make an idea that had an impact that was crafted differently through sound, through the breathing, and suddenly it's gonna later harmonize with a line of dialogue. So that's the beauty of the language of cinema, that the impacts, you know, they can multiply, you know. And I think that's you know, that when I'm thinking about that language, it's that you have the desire that people start talking the language of the film, and that suddenly they understand. Suddenly, you know, they are moved by the number of a page of a book. So this you have to build up, and this is not storytelling. This is harmonies. This is echo. This is, and that's writing. That's what writing for film is. And it's being obsessed by the impact of ideas. So it's really the opposite of trying to impress someone. You know, cinema is really, what kind of hormones cinema is trying to trigger in your brain? Mostly adrenaline, you know, the movement of the camera, you know. I think Chantal and I were looking for oxytocin, you know. We're looking for connection. And that speaking this language together, we feel we're all smarter, you know. That's how I feel when I watch a film. I feel smart. You know, it's amazing. That someone makes you feel smart, you know. So, no, I don't think that dialogue is, I mean, yeah, I think it's part of the toolbox of creating those impacts of joy through harmonies, yeah. No, I feel like I'm quite repetitive. No, yeah, it has evolved mostly because, you know, I really put a frontier between my 3 first films and my 2 last. Because for the first 3 films, I was trying to, well, maybe not the first. I think the first might be the most radical. But kind of dancing with the, you know, the language of cinema, so the language of conflict, the language of violence, you know, traumatizing my character a little bit so that we get a little empathy, so that you would identify. You know, I was kind of going by this book that I was taught. So I think now I'm being more honest with what's easy for me, what I like. But that doesn't mean that you don't face full new grammar. For instance, you know, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I put myself in a situation that I'd never faced, that was shot, counter-shot. And I'd never done that. It's not really a grammar I like. You know, I tend to put people in the same frame. And so suddenly the situation of the painter and the sitter, I was like, oh, it's going to be shot, counter-shot, shot, counter-shot. So I have to think about that very deeply for the first time. Does that make it a different language than the one I spoke before? I don't think so, in a way. But I had to face new questions with where to put the camera and what is the cut, you know. But my situation was not a conversation. It was someone looking at someone else, so suddenly the cut is in the gaze, right? So suddenly I have to think about what I think usually, but with this new grammar that I put myself into. But I tend to go straighter to what I know I like. There's this sentence by Miles Davis that I think I adore about what it's like to grow, you know, to grow old creatively. And you know, Miles Davis is a musician. Was a musician. He says it takes time to sound like yourself. And then I think when you sound like yourself, then you can sound like yourself dancing, you can sound like yourself sleeping, you can confront new challenges of that language, but still, you know, the same ethic, because I think we also feel the ethic of Chantal Akerman in the processes. So yeah, I feel I'm always doing the same thing, I must say. But that's okay.